What I am thinking about constantly as an instructor is trying to give you different perspectives on which to see the issues that we're talking about. And in any one class, we only have 75 minutes. So we're limited in the number of perspectives that we can take. Any topic we talk about in this class, really, it could be, we could talk for an entire semester to cover the many, many different perspectives. There are thousands of books that have been written on this issue and thousands of articles. And scholars spend their entire lives thinking about this issue. And we're going to talk about it now in about 70 minutes. And it's highly politicized, and there's so many different ways to approach it that there's no way to be thoughtful, even-handed, and fair. The only thing that I can do is try to be a little more thoughtful and a little more even-handed and a little more fair to give you some different ways to see some things. I'm going to bring them out two at a time for the whole class, and we're just going to keep switching. So two of them will come out, and I'm going to talk about something. I'm going to have them go back out in the hallway, and then the two other people are going to come, and I'm going to talk about the same issue. So we're talking about immigration today. I've broken immigration up into 5 different subtopics, so to speak, okay? And I'm going to say something about each subtopic. And with the first group, each time they come out, I'm going to take the position that we really need to get immigration under control. Unfettered or uncontrolled immigration can undermine the social order. I'm going to take that basic position. Then the second group's going to come out, and I'm only going to take the second position. I'm going to take the position that, hey, immigration is a net positive, and immigrants are really good for the social order wherever they are. Okay? This is a map of the United States. This is one of the early, before it was colonized by the Europeans, right? This is a map of the U.S., man. This was not barren territory. People lived here. The entire land space was lived in by the indigenous peoples of the Americas, right? And they had kind of carved it up. And the lines that you see there aren't really exact, but it's kind of more or less. We had hundreds and hundreds of different tribes, right? And just in this area, what would be North America here. However, and so a lot of people argue, hey, so therefore, like the border, like if you look at this border between Mexico and the U.S., it's not the people cross the border. People living here cross the border. The border crossed them. The people who came in here, they made a border, this artificial border here, and it crossed over them. So the DNA of the indigenous peoples right here and the indigenous peoples here, it's exactly the same. And so people make the argument that so therefore, in a way, we kind of came, the Europeans came and they stole the land and therefore, but I would argue, in a way that's true, right? Can you go to the next slide? This is the planet, right? This is like what God sees, however she sees it, this is how she sees it. It's just like this planet. There are no borders anywhere, right? But the truth is, go to the next slide. Life is about changing borders. And this is the patterns of human migration over time. And what you notice about these arrows is that people are just moving into all sorts of different places constantly. Going north, going south, like different peoples who were colonize this area, they get up and they go colonize another area. And that's just how it is. So the indigenous, can you go back 2 slides? So these people weren't just living in peace. They were all also moving into each other's lands. And they fought and they had wars and they battled each other because these were different tribes of people. Now go forward a little bit. And so that's what's happening here. People just change. And so that's what happens now. What happens suddenly is that, hey, this land in the Americas, back in the late 15th century, 16th century, these people from this area of the world just came into this whole Western hemisphere and they took it over. And that's what it is. And so these people have no obligation to admit other people who come in. Once they establish their legal boundaries, their legal territory, They have no legal obligation to admit anybody else or bring anybody else in, because that's just how it is. Just like Europeans. If you look at the history of Europe, it's a really fascinating transformation. Just like European nation states, they're just shifting and changing. And like you watch it, you look at a map of the changing political boundaries of Europe over the past 2,000 years. It's a fascinating transformation with European tribes just battling it out with one another. And so these people, so we have no legal obligation to help undocumented people who want to come here. We're in this place called the United States. We set the laws, and people should abide by the laws. Just like European countries, African nations, Asian nations, etc. That's just kind of how it is. So we have no moral, legal, or ethical obligation toward anybody else. Just abide by the laws. Because that's the history of human beings on this planet, is just changing and reshaping the environment.
I don't think it's as simple as people just abiding the laws. I think if it was that simple, I think people would choose to stay in their homeland because they're knowledgeable of the fact that they're committing a crime, entering the U.S. illegally. So they're doing that with that in mind. So for them to have committed that crime, it's for a reason valid enough for them to have thought that it would be worth it. So I don't know. I think to say that illegal immigrants should just abide by the U.S.'s law, despite the conditions that are trying to make them leave back home, they're going to be willing to overlook the U.S.'s law just because the consequences would still be better than what they could be facing.
Okay,
possible.
All right, I got you. Yep, and maybe if they're in jail here, they get three meals and a bed, right? Okay, but still, we don't have an obligation. The people of the United States, based on legal principles, also don't have an obligation to really let people break the laws and come into the country, because that's just kind of how it is. Why do we have that obligation? Why should we? Yeah. Any more than Germany does, for example.
You say that Americans don't have the ethical, moral by law, whatever to abide by, the law. But they came to other people's lands first, illegally, and then wanted to make laws for them to abide by, but that wasn't their land in the first place. Just like you said, the border. They put that border there and was in their land because they share the same DNA.
I got you. But your people, right? So your blood, let's look at Puerto Rico, right? Puerto Rico was a land of the Taino people. So the Spaniards came and Africans came and Europeans came, and Africans didn't come willingly, but they came nonetheless, right? And clearly you have African blood and you have white blood and you may have Taino blood. And so okay, well, that's the nature of life. It just changes. It all just changes. And you can't ever go backwards in time. You just accept that it changes, and now this group of people's in control. Russia might actually take control of Ukraine. And okay, that's what it is. And now the Ukraine is under the domination of Russia. And that's just what it's going to be. And what can you do? No one needs to, you can't look backwards for the legal foundation for what is happening in any one moment. The borders of the past aren't the borders of today. So you got to go with what is today. So therefore, even though we built that border between, the U.S. put the border there between Mexico and the U.S., and okay, the Mexicans didn't put the border there, but we put it there, so we win. That's what it is. Now you got to abide by the border. I don't like it necessarily, but that's what it is.
I hadn't thought about what you said about the people of the U.S. not having an obligation.
Yeah.
I think that line of thinking just leads to ignoring the problem of undocumented immigrants.
Okay.
And that would just lead to undocumented immigrants entering the country without any type of programs to help them or assimilate them or that wouldn't actually lead to any progress in the situation, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah. So the idea is that may be the case, but we still got to figure out what to do. a map of the U.S. before the Europeans show up. It's not exact. It's just the map of the U.S. part because, like, you can't, these borders weren't here and these borders weren't here. You know what I mean? It's just a landmass. You know, the truth is, this is the land that people were living. The Europeans come, they discover the people who already knew they existed, right? So how do you discover people who already knew they existed? But they nonetheless discovered them. We named, they now go by we use Indian or Indios because, Columbus thought that he was going to India by going west. And so okay, but this land, this is populated by people who have been living here for millennia. And that's kind of the nature of it. So, and then they just were colonized. And just destroyed, man. Cultures destroyed. The longest, most extensive genocide in human history happened right here with these people, right? And if you go to Bolivia, so if you think about the Europeans, right? Thinking about Europeans as trespassers, thieves, slavers, genocidal racists. The most extensive genocide in human history. So why aren't they genocidal racists? Because they were all racist. Because one of the reasons the genocide could actually happen is the same reason that chattel slavery could happen, that people had racist ideologies and had this idea that they were actually the advanced peoples. They didn't have it right away when the whole process started, but they developed an ideology around that. So all these people, far from being people who would be should be held up, there's these white supremacist criminals, and this is a problem. So all of this land, go to the next slide, all of the land, you got all these suburbs in the United States, this is all red land. This is Indian land. This is indigenous people's land. This room right here, where you're sitting right now, the plot of land on which you are sitting and I am standing, this is red land. This is stolen land. The blood of peoples is under this land. This is a problem. It should be acknowledged. So when people decide, hey, we are going to come to this other country, first off, we didn't invite you here. The people, we didn't invite you. We didn't ask you to establish these territories and these laws. You established it on us. You imposed your way of thinking on us. Your genocidal, maniacal thinking and ideology, you impose it on us. So why do we have to abide by that? And so when I think about all immigration, including undocumented immigration, what right do I have to say, no, you can't come here. You're here illegally? Can you go back one slide? These people were here illegally. I'm here illegally. My ancestors were here illegally. You know what I mean? So your dad, Addie's father came illegally. My ancestors came illegally. How are my ancestors still? But my ancestors, but they had paperwork and they arrived at who knows where, right? Doesn't matter. It's from the perspective of the indigenous peoples in the Americas, it's illegal.
Well, I guess if you think about it, everyone's an immigrant then, so.
Well, you can look at the indigenous peoples, the first peoples, when it truly was a barren land. Yeah. They weren't immigrants, so.
Yeah, I mean, after they came, it's just, the land was just up for grabs, unfortunately. And it's just, people just want to take everything now. Okay,
but somehow these people, the so-called, the people of European ancestry, or anybody who is a naturalized American, here in the U.S., you have this idea that somehow you deserve to be here. It's what do you deserve to be here? So if I take your phone, and you can say hey, that's my phone, okay? But then I take your phone and I give it to this guy right here, and I'm yeah, well, I gave it to him. And then he gives it to somebody else, and he gives it by the time he has it and he's making calls on it, he has no idea that phone's stolen. That's his phone. Maybe he buys it off him. That's his phone now. So it's okay, what do you think? He should give it back to you? He bought it. He bought it fairly from him. it's just okay. That this land used to be red land. It's just okay. Well, that was a long time ago. Well, why is that okay? It's like same if he's got her phone now. Why is it somehow okay for him to have her phone? Just because it passed through different hands over time. It's stolen phone. It's stolen land.
Yeah, when they came here, you understand how it's wrong, but I mean, right now, in this present day and age, I don't think we have much to do or much that we could change from what Columbus did when he came here. I think we're past that.
Okay. Yeah, we're past it. So, but now it goes back, it sounds to me, though, it goes back to what you were saying earlier. Have some empathy and compassion.
Pump it up!